My name is Daniel. I'm 27 years old. And what I'm about to tell you is the most honest I've ever been about any of this, not because I've figured it all out, but because I finally stopped being afraid of what the truth looks like. The first time I saw Emilia, I almost walked into a glass door. First day of college. I was navigating the main courtyard with a crumpled campus map, a backpack that was slightly too heavy, and the very specific anxiety of someone who doesn't know where anything is but is desperately trying to look like they do. And then I stopped walking. Because in the middle of that courtyard, surrounded by a group of people who all seemed to exist in a higher tax bracket than me, was the most magnetic human being I had ever seen in person. Her name, I would learn later, was Emilia Voss. Old money family, the kind of wealthy where it doesn't announce itself, it just hums quietly in the background of everything. The right clothes, the right posture, the right way of laughing that somehow never seemed performative. She wasn't trying to be the center of the room. She just was. Every head turned when she passed, including mine and me. I was the quiet kid from a middle-class neighborhood who'd gotten a partial scholarship and was sharing a dorm room with someone who kept their pet lizard in an unlocked tank. Our worlds had absolutely no business overlapping, but somehow she kept finding her way to me. It started small. She sat next to me in a first-year literature seminar, not because the other seats were taken, because they weren't, and borrowed my pen without asking, which for some reason I found more charming than I should have. Then I ran into her in the library. Then the coffee line. Then a study group for a philosophy elective we were both apparently taking for entirely different reasons. I was there because I needed the credits. She was there, she told me later, because she was obsessed with the question of whether free will is real or if we're all just very convinced we're making choices. I told her that was either the deepest thing I'd heard all week or a line she used to sound interesting at parties. She laughed, and then she said, "Honestly, both." That was the moment, right there. We started spending time together in the easy, unspoken way that happens when two people just keep gravitating toward the same spaces and eventually stop pretending it's a coincidence. Study sessions that ran until the campus library closed. Late dinners at the one cheap noodle place near campus that she genuinely loved, despite the fact that she could have been eating anywhere. Long walks back to the dorms arguing about books and films, and whether people are fundamentally good or fundamentally afraid of being found out. And then one night, walking back in the rain because we'd both forgotten to check the weather and neither of us was willing to cut the conversation short, she reached over and took my hand. She didn't say anything, she just held it. I was 20 years old and completely, hopelessly gone. We dated for almost 2 years, and I want to be careful here because it would be easy and convenient for me to look back now and say it was all hollow, that I should have seen the signs, that none of it was real, but I'd be lying. Those 2 years felt real to me in a way that very few things in my life have felt real since. The late-night phone calls that went until 3 in the morning over nothing and everything. The way she'd show up at my dorm with coffee and no explanation when she knew I had an exam. The weekend we drove 4 hours to see a tiny live music show for a band she liked and I'd never heard of and ended up loving. There was only one problem, her father. Mr. Voss was a man who had built a significant portion of his personality around the careful management of who his daughter associated with. He was polished, precise, and completely convinced that his opinion on any given matter was not only correct, but also a gift to whoever received it. I met him 3 times. The first 2 times he was icily civil, polite in the way that is specifically designed to make the other person aware they are being tolerated rather than welcomed. The third time was different. It was a family dinner at their home, a house that was, by any reasonable measure, closer to a small estate than a house. Emilia had invited me, and I'd spent an embarrassing amount of time trying to figure out what to wear. About 40 minutes into the evening, Mr. Voss found a moment when Emilia was out of the room, touched my elbow, and guided me toward the far end of the hallway with the practiced ease of someone who does this kind of thing regularly. He looked at me for a moment before he spoke, not unkindly, exactly, just with the calm certainty of someone who has already made a decision and is simply informing you of it. "You seem like a decent enough young man, Daniel," he said. "But I want to be honest with you because I think you deserve honesty more than you deserve comfortable lies. Decent isn't enough. You come from a different world than Emilia, and that gap doesn't close just because 2 people are young and fond of each other. It widens, and when it does, everyone suffers, especially her. You will never be good enough for my daughter. That's not cruelty, that's just fact. I'd appreciate it if you thought seriously about what you're doing here." Then he smoothed the front of his jacket and walked back to the dining room. I stood in that hallway for a full minute. I swallowed it. I swallowed all of it because I loved her. Because I told myself that it didn't matter what he thought, that what mattered was what we had. I was very young, and that is exactly the kind of thing very young people tell themselves. What I didn't know, what I had no possible way of knowing, was that the real game had already started. And I wasn't a player, I was the board. It started on a Tuesday, no fight, no argument. No moment I could point to as a before and after, just silence. My calls went to voicemail, my texts sat on delivered. I told myself she was swamped, stressed, going through something she'd tell me about when she was ready. I told myself everything except the obvious thing because the obvious thing was too heavy to hold. 4 days passed, then 5. On the 6th day I texted, "I'm not upset, I just want to know you're okay." Delivered, unread. I talked to our mutual friends, as casually as I could manage, which was not very casually at all. They gave me vague answers that landed somewhere between, "I don't know," and "I really can't say," which is a combination that tells you everything while technically telling you nothing. On a Thursday night, 11 days after the silence began, my phone rang. She was crying before she even spoke. Not the kind of crying that comes from sadness, exactly, the kind that comes from carrying something too long and finally having to put it down, even if putting it down breaks something. "Daniel," she said, and then nothing for a few seconds, just the sound of her trying to hold herself together. "I'm here," I said. "Whatever it is, just tell me. Please don't make this harder than it already is." Her voice cracked on the last word. "This has to end, it has to end. I'm so sorry." "Emilia, wait, what happened? Did something happen? Just talk to me, please." She hung up. I sat with my phone in my hand for a very long time. I called back. It rang out. I called again. Voicemail. I sent a message that said I wasn't going to pressure her, that I just needed to understand, that I'd give her space if that's what she wanted, but could she please just tell me what was going on? Delivered. Unread. 3 months later, I got a text from my cousin Marcus. No message, just a photo. A wedding announcement, the kind they post in the society pages of the local paper. Professional photograph, elegant venue, the whole thing. My brother Adrian was in the photo, and standing next to him in a white dress, smiling a smile I had seen 1,000 times and thought I understood, was Emilia. My brother was 6 years older than me. We'd grown up in the same house. I'd borrowed his clothes. He'd driven me to school when our parents were running late. He was the person I called when something went wrong, which now, standing in my kitchen, staring at this photo on my phone, struck me as one of the more brutally ironic facts of my life. I stared at the photo until the screen went dark. Then I sat down on the kitchen floor, which was not something I planned, but which seemed like the most honest response available to me. That was the day I learned that betrayal doesn't always come with a warning sign. Sometimes it wears a familiar face. Sometimes it wears two. I went cold for about a year, not dramatically. Not in the way you see in films where someone stops eating or walks into the ocean. Just quietly cold. I threw myself into work. I made new routines. I didn't talk about it because talking about it meant making it real in front of other people, and I wasn't ready for that. I deleted their numbers from my phone. I avoided any part of the city where I might run into either of them. I was not okay, but I was functional, and for a long time I told myself that was close enough. I was almost at something resembling stability when my phone rang at 2:14 in the morning on a Wednesday. I looked at the screen. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. I answered. "Daniel." I knew the voice immediately. You don't spend 2 years with someone and stop recognizing the way they say your name. "Emilia, I need you to listen to me and not hang up." She was whispering, not the way people whisper for privacy, but the way people whisper when they're afraid of being heard. "Please, I don't have much time and I need to say this." "Say what?" A pause, the sound of her moving somewhere, a door clicking softly. "I made a mistake, the worst mistake of my life, and I need you to know that I didn't choose this. I didn't choose any of this. Adrian blackmailed me." The word landed like something physical. "What are you talking about?" "When we were together, he was watching us. I don't know how long it went on. He had photos, videos. Private things, Daniel, things that were only ever meant to exist between the two of us. He compiled them. And then he went to my father and gave him a very simple choice." Her voice was steady now, in the way that voices go steady when the person speaking has rehearsed this too many times to cry about it anymore. "He said, either Emilia marries me or I release everything. He told my father he'd make sure it destroyed Daniel's reputation. His career before it even started. He said he knew people. He said he'd make it so Daniel couldn't recover. I was standing in my kitchen in the dark. I hadn't turned any lights on. And your father agreed. A long silence. He sat across from Adrian and shook his hand, Daniel. He didn't even hesitate. He'd been looking for a reason to end it, and Adrian gave him the cleanest one possible. Her breath caught. And then they both told me what was going to happen and said that if I contacted you, the agreement was off. So I called you the one time I was allowed to, said the words I was given, and hung up. And then I married a man who terrifies me, because the alternative was watching him destroy you. I didn't speak for a very long time. Why are you telling me now? Because I can't keep living in this house and pretending I'm not dying in it. And because, she stopped. Because I think he's capable of worse than I understood when I agreed to this. And I'm scared, Daniel. I'm genuinely scared. She hung up a few minutes later. She had to. She said she was running out of time before he'd notice she was awake. I stood in my dark kitchen and let the full weight of it settle into my body. My brother hadn't just stolen the woman I loved out of desire or jealousy or even simple cruelty. He had constructed a trap. He had surveilled us, assembled evidence, walked into her father's house, and negotiated with another human being's life like it was a business transaction. And he had used my own relationship, the most genuine thing I had, as the weapon. 4 months after that phone call, Mr. Voss was dead. He fell down the grand staircase of the family mansion on a Sunday evening. The story that circulated was consistent and clean. He'd been in poor health, the stairs were steep. These things happen to older men in large houses. The family released a brief statement. The funeral was quiet, tasteful, expensive. Adrian stood next to Emilia in a dark suit with a properly somber expression and accepted condolences from people who had no reason to think this was anything other than a tragedy. I went, because not going would have drawn attention. I stood in the back. I didn't speak to either of them. Emilia caught my eye once across the room and immediately looked away. 2 weeks after the funeral, she showed up at my apartment, no call ahead. Just a knock at the door at 7 in the evening. She looked like she hadn't been sleeping. She was holding a small flash drive between 2 fingers. She held it out to me without saying anything. "What is this?" I asked. "Watch it," she said, "and then decide what you want to do." She left before I could ask anything else. The drive contained 47 seconds of deleted security footage from the mansion, recovered by a private IT firm she'd hired without Adrian's knowledge. It was from the hallway camera outside the study, time-stamped approximately 12 minutes before Mr. Voss was found at the bottom of the stairs. Adrian and Mr. Voss were in the frame. Arguing, I couldn't hear audio, but I could read the energy of it clearly. Mr. Voss was pointing at Adrian's chest, his posture tight and aggressive in the way of a man who is used to controlling situations and is discovering he no longer does. Adrian's body language shifted from something defensive into something still, a particular kind of controlled stillness that isn't calm. It's the opposite of calm. Then Mr. Voss took a step backward toward the top of the staircase, and Adrian's hand shot forward. The contact was brief, a shove, sharp and deliberate. Mr. Voss disappeared from the frame. Adrian stood at the top of the stairs for 4 seconds, completely motionless. Then he smoothed the front of his jacket, the same gesture I realized with cold horror that I had seen his father-in-law make that night at dinner, and walked away. The footage cut to static. I called Emilia. "I've watched it 40 times, she said when she picked up before I could speak. "I keep hoping I'm seeing it wrong." "You're not," I said, a long silence on both ends. "I'm going to the police," I told her. "I know," she said. "I figured you would. I needed someone else to see it first. I needed someone else to know that I'm not making this up, Daniel. I'm not crazy. I'm not imagining it." "You're not," I said again. What had started as blackmail had become something with no clean name. The man who had looked me in the eyes in a hallway and told me I would never be enough was now at the bottom of a staircase. And my brother had walked away and smoothed the front of his jacket. I was building my case. I had the flash drive. I had Emilia's account. I had notes on every conversation. I was 3 days away from walking into a police station and laying all of it down on a table. That's when Maya called. Maya had been part of Emilia's friend group in college. We'd spoken maybe 6 times total across 2 years, always in group settings. She was not someone I expected to hear from. She was not someone I expected anything from at all. She opened with, "I've been trying to decide whether to call you for 6 months. I'm sorry it took this long." "Okay," I said carefully. "There's something you need to know about how you and Emilia got together. And before I tell you, I want you to know that I genuinely believe she loves you, or loved you, however you want to say it. What I'm about to tell you started as one thing and became something else, and I think you deserve to know both parts. I told her to say it. Sophomore year, a few weeks before the semester started, there was a bet. In our friend group. We used to do these stupid challenges. I know how that sounds. I know it was awful. I'm not defending it. I'm just telling you what happened. Someone suggested that Emilia should try to make a regular guy fall for her. Not cruel, they said, just to see if she could do it outside of her usual world. The prize was that we'd all chip in for her Europe trip that summer. Maya's voice was steady but uncomfortable. She agreed. She picked you specifically. She'd noticed you in a class. You were the target, Daniel, from day one. I sat with that for a moment. She picked me, I repeated. Yes, as a bet. Yes, I didn't say anything. Maya kept going. But here's the other part. About a month in, she called the whole thing off. She called me and said she wasn't doing it anymore, and when I pushed her, she said, and I remember this exactly, she said, I actually like him. I actually really like him, and I'm not doing this anymore, and you all need to swear you're never going to say anything. She never collected the money. She told us it was over. And as far as I know, she never told you because she was ashamed of how it started and terrified of what you'd think. A long silence. Why are you telling me now? I asked. Because she's in danger, and you're the only person I think actually gives enough of a damn to do something about it. And because I think you were walking into this situation without the full picture, and you deserve the full picture even if part of it hurts. After I hung up, I sat for a long time with both halves of that truth. She had chosen me as a target. She had also chosen me for real. Both of those things lived in the same relationship, and I did not know how to put them in the same room as each other without one destroying the other. I'm still not sure I do. My mother passed away the year before all of this began. She had left me a sealed envelope. On the outside, in her handwriting, open this when you truly need to understand why. I had held that envelope in my hands the day of her funeral, turned it over twice, and put it in a shoebox at the top of my closet. Something about the phrasing, when you truly need to understand why, made me afraid of it. Like it was a door I could only open once, and I wasn't sure I was ready for what was on the other side. The night after Maya's call, I climbed up and got the shoebox. Inside the envelope was a letter in my mother's handwriting, 4 pages, front and back, and a folded legal document, a paternity record. I won't transcribe the whole letter here because parts of it were meant for me in a way that belongs to me alone. But the core of it was this. Adrian was my father's son. He was not my mother's. He had been born from an affair my father had before my parents were married. When the relationship ended and the woman left the city, left the country, left Adrian with a grandmother who called my father when the boy was 4 years old and said she couldn't manage any more, my father had made a decision. He brought Adrian into our home. He told my mother everything. They had, according to the letter, one of the worst arguments of their marriage. And then my mother, being who she was, made a choice to raise him anyway, with the condition that the truth stayed buried. Not from cruelty, because she believed he deserved a stable life more than he deserved a complicated one. The other thing the letter told me was this. My father's will, finalized in the last year of his life, named me as primary heir. The legitimate son, not out of cruelty toward Adrian. My father had provided for him in other ways, but the primary inheritance, the house, the accounts, was mine. Adrian had known. My father had told him directly, years before either of us understood what it meant. And Adrian had sat with that knowledge for over 2 decades. He had watched me grow up in what he believed was his father's house, receiving what he believed should have been his approval, being named heir to what he believed should have been his future. He hadn't stolen Emilia because he loved her. He had done it because she was mine. He didn't want Emilia. He wanted everything that had ever been given to me instead of him. He wanted my father's acknowledgement in the only form he could take it now that my father was gone. And since he couldn't take that, since that would never be available to him, because the dead can't revise their opinions, he had decided to dismantle me instead. Piece by piece, starting with the person I loved most. I put the letter down on my kitchen table and sat with the fact that the boy who had driven me to school, whose clothes I had borrowed, who I had called on bad days, had been building this for longer than I knew. I had everything I needed, the flash drive with the footage, the paternity document, Emilia's testimony, Maya's account, a full timeline of the blackmail and the marriage and the death. I had an appointment with a detective for 9 o'clock the following morning, and I had gone to bed that night feeling, for the first time in years, like I was about to do the only thing that made sense. I woke up to 6 missed calls from Emilia's number. I called back immediately. No answer. I tried again, straight to voicemail. I wasn't immediately alarmed. I told myself maybe her battery had died, maybe something had come up. But something in the back of my mind had started moving, and it didn't stop when I called her housekeeper, who said Emilia had left the previous evening with a single bag and given no indication of where she was going. It didn't stop when I called the two friends of hers I still had numbers for and got nothing useful from either of them. By midnight, she had been missing for over 18 hours. I didn't sleep. 46 hours after her disappearance, at a little after noon, I received a video file from an unknown number. No message, just the file. I watched it standing at my kitchen counter with the same cold focus you get when you've already passed through the fear and arrived somewhere beyond it. The room in the video was dim, industrial, concrete walls, a single overhead light, no windows. Emilia was seated in a metal chair, her wrists bound behind her. There was a bruise forming under her left eye. Her hair was loose and messy. She was looking directly at the camera and she was crying, not the performed kind. The kind that lives in the chest and comes from genuine exhaustion, then a voice from off-camera. I had not heard that voice in over a year, but I recognized it immediately in the way that some sounds bypass recognition and go directly to the body. "Hey, little brother," Adrian said. His voice was calm. That was the most terrifying part. Not anger, not cruelty, just a steady, measured calm, the voice of someone who has thought this through and is not concerned about the outcome. "I know what you've been collecting. I know about the drive. I know about your 9 o'clock appointment, and I want to give you some time to think very carefully before you keep it." A pause. "You go to the police, and she doesn't make it to the end of the week. I want you to think about whether you're prepared to carry that. I want you to really think about what matters more, justice or her." Another pause. "You have 24 hours. I'd use them wisely." The video cut out. I watched it 4 times. My hands were not entirely steady. But something in my mind was working despite all of it, turning the footage over methodically, the way you do when you know you're supposed to be falling apart, but some part of your brain refuses to cooperate. On the 5th watch, I saw it. In the background, just off-center to the left of Emilia's shoulder. A mirror, tall, slightly angled, the kind you might find propped against a wall in a storage space or an empty room. It caught her reflection at a slight angle. Her face in the mirror was not the same face that was turned toward the camera. The camera showed tears, fear, exhaustion. The mirror showed something else entirely. She was smiling, not a small smile. Not a nervous twitch or a coping mechanism or the reflexive expression of someone trying to hold themselves together. A slow, deliberate, controlled smile. The specific smile of someone who has been waiting for a plan to land and is watching it land exactly where they aimed it. She didn't know about the mirror. I watched those 5 seconds 11 times. I watched them on full screen. I watched them paused, frame by frame. And each time the image was the same. That smile did not belong to a victim. And then I sat down, very slowly, and let the entire story rearrange itself inside my head. The midnight phone call, delivered to me at exactly the right moment to open the wound back up and point me toward Adrian. The flash drive, handed to me personally, not sent, not delivered through an intermediary, placed in my hands by Emilia herself. The timing of every revelation. Maya's call, the letter, the footage, all of it landing in sequence. All of it arriving through channels that Emilia either controlled or had access to, all of it building the same case toward the same conclusion. Go to the police. Destroy Adrian. What if that was never about saving her? What if it was about using me to do what she couldn't do directly, bring down the man who had trapped her, while leaving no fingerprints of her own? What if the video was not a threat but a test? A way of seeing whether I would hold, whether I would panic, whether I would make the move they needed me to make? What if Adrian and Emilia had never been enemies? What if they had been working together from the beginning, manipulating me through a carefully constructed story of victimhood and betrayal? Using my love for her, my anger at him, my sense of moral obligation, as the engine of a plan I had never been invited into. What if I was never the wronged hero of this story? What if I was the weapon? Every single thing I thought I knew fractured along that line, the love that felt real, the betrayal that felt devastating, the rescue I had been building toward. All of it possibly theater, constructed specifically for an audience of one. Me, I still have the video, I still have the drive, I still have the letter and the document and the notes. I did not go to my 9 o'clock appointment. I'm not saying I believe any one version of this completely. I'm not saying I've figured out the truth. What I'm saying is that I have learned slowly, painfully, at enormous cost, that I was not asking the right question. I was asking, who is the villain? And the real question was, Why does everyone in this story need me to do something? The most dangerous games are the ones where you don't realize you're playing until the board has already been flipped. I don't know what Emilia is. I don't know what she was to me, or what she is now, or whether any single moment of those 2 years existed in the way I remember it. I don't know if Adrian is a murderer acting alone or a piece in something larger. I don't know if the smile in the mirror was victory or survival or something I don't have a word for yet. What I know is this: I'm done being moved. I'm not going to the police. I'm not running. I'm not making another move until I understand every side of this board, not the version I was given, but the version that's actually true. And for the first time since the first day of college, I am the one in the shadows. I am the one watching, and nobody knows that yet.